Hi everyone, my name is Thatcher Kamen, and on behalf of MDG, we bring you another episode of 3x5, where we bring you 3 takeaways in 5 minutes. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Jacqueline Wells, MDG's Vice President, to talk about the importance of hybrid events, which have been highly discussed moving forward. So, Jacqueline, what does the next generation of events look like, and how have you been navigating digital strategy during COVID-19?
Well, I think that, when COVID first hit and impacted our industry, we were sort of in panic mode trying to figure out what to do. And everyone was pivoting to virtual events. And I think we've now had a little bit of time to kind of understand the strategy, what the benefits are of a virtual environment. And we've also seen this shift in consumer behavior because we've all had this crash course in digital. We're all working remotely. My 4-year-old knows how to work Zoom, et cetera. And I think that behavior has inherently changed. And so I think we're going to have to adapt our model regardless. And I think that's going to be hybrid events. And when I say hybrid events, that's any sort of virtual component. So it could be webinars, it could be live streaming, it could be some kind of online marketplace, or it could be a full virtual environment that complements your live event.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jacqueline. I think there is so much potential within the hybrid event space. How do you think a hybrid event would impact attendance at a live event, as you do possibly see more people choosing to stay home instead of attending the live events?
So I think that for a long time, I feel like that's why the industry never pivoted to virtual to begin with, is because everyone was afraid of cannibalization of their live event. But I feel like now that we've sort of been forced into this, we're learning that it actually augments the experience. And I think coming out of COVID, we're going to have two distinct groups. We're going to have groups that are craving social interaction, like myself, and we're also going to have the groups that are very, very cautious still and not wanting to be around people. And so adding this virtual components makes sure that you don't have an event that goes in decline, but then beyond that, we're going to see new audiences. You're not limited by geography, so people who typically haven't been able to travel, or it's been cost prohibitive to travel, are able to come. So your audience, you're casting your net a bit wider. And then we also know from lessons from COVID is that 80% of your audience actually has no intention of participating in a live event. So these, in many cases, are completely different audiences. So it really does leave room for growth.
So how does the participation of virtual events differ from live events, Jacqueline, and how does having those virtual attendees impact the overall experience?
So I think for exhibitors, they're getting the best of both worlds. So you still have the live event. They're still able to interact with people, demonstrate their products, do everything that you would typically do at a live event. But adding the virtual component then allows them to reach an audience that perhaps doesn't like to communicate one-on-one. So again, just looking at the data, we're seeing that people are more likely to engage a person in a virtual booth than they would on site, and they're 45% more likely to ask a question. So if you think about like the millennial audience is a really good example. They prefer communicating digitally, so you're going to get more engagement. Not to mention, of course, in the digital environment, you have all of that really, really rich data. So you're not just looking at foot traffic, you're also looking at clicks, and within those clicks, you understand exactly who's engaging with you, what they're engaging with, and that's really powerful data. And then on the attendee side, making sure that you have those engagement platforms built into your experience so that you're bringing together the in-person attendees with the virtual attendees. So making sure that you have things like open chats, polling, open social, Q&As, matchmaking with artificial intelligence, so that you're still making those valuable connections and that networking experience for attendees. And one of the interesting things is, in talking to some of our clients, they're actually bringing in some of the virtual components to the live event. So I was talking to someone last week who's looking at putting a lounge at their event for in-person attendees to then engage with the content that's available virtually.
Yeah, Jacqueline, I think the main question a lot of people are going to wonder is how does the virtual component affect the business model and revenue?
So I think it depends. There's so many variations of a hybrid event. So if you're just live streaming your keynote, you're probably not going to charge full price for people engaging with that content. But if you have in-depth workshops or learning labs that are part of a larger virtual environment, then you might be charging the same amount because the value is the same, or the perceived return on investment. But I think overall, there's a huge upside for a hybrid event in terms of the revenue impact. And there is a study that was done a couple years ago with PCMA, which is the Association for the Convention Industry. And what they did is they looked at the previous 5 years where they added virtual components to their offerings, and within that time period of adding those virtual components, they were able to bring in an additional like almost 4,000 new prospects, and they also added an incremental $1 million worth of revenue. So like I said, the upside can be huge if you're really building a creative business model around this.
This does seem like a no-brainer for event organizers, Jacqueline. So in regards to the hybrid events, where do you start and what platforms would you recommend for the hybrid events?
So we get asked that question a lot. A lot of people think to start with the technology, but the most important thing is to make sure that it's an audience first approach. So think very carefully, very differently about the experience and the journey for each of your personas, because like I said, they're not the same. They're not the same people and they have different needs. And simply repurposing content from your live event, there may be a big disconnect with who you're repurposing that for with your virtual attendees, because they're completely different audiences. But to answer your question, MDG is actually putting together a virtual platform ebook that really evaluates based off of different needs as well as different formats to give event producer this sort of curated book of options. And that's something that we'll be hosting on our website in the next month.
This has been great, Jacqueline. Very insightful. Thank you for your time, and thank you to everybody else for tuning in to this episode of 3 by 5.
Thank you.